By late 1943, the air war over Europe has reached a level of intensity few could have predicted at the beginning of the conflict. The Allied bombing campaign over Germany grows larger each month, sending hundreds of heavy bombers deep into enemy territory. The Luftwaffe, though increasingly strained, continues to defend the skies with determination born from desperation. Casualties rise on both sides. The skies over Europe become one of the most dangerous battlefields of the war. Among the newest crews joining the 8th Air Force is the team of Ye Olde Pub, a B-17 Flying Fortress stationed at RAF Kimbolton. The aircraft is still fresh from the assembly line, and many of the men inside have never flown a combat sortie. Their pilot, Charlie Brown, is young, confident, and trained to handle one of the most robust bombers ever built. The aircraft's nickname, painted along the nose, reflects the humor common among crews who knew each mission could be their last. They try to lighten the weight of their reality with small gestures of familiarity. On December 20th, 1943, Brown and his crew receive orders to join a large bomber formation, targeting industrial areas in Bremen. Intelligence reports describe heavy defenses but emphasize the importance of the target Bremenhause's factories vital to the German war effort. Destroying them is essential to weakening German production. The men review procedures, load ammunition, secure flight suits, and prepare for a long and dangerous day. The ground crews complete their final checks. Engines roar to life. With dozens of other bombers, Ye Olde Pub lifts into the cold winter morning. As the bomber stream heads toward the German coast, the familiar tension settles in. Crews know that once Germany appears on the horizon, the quiet moments will end Luftwaffe interceptors, and dense flak belts wait on the other side. For new pilots like Brown, the dangers described in training become painfully real in combat. The mission proceeds smoothly until the formations reach Bremen's defensive ring. Then the sky erupts. Flak batteries positioned around the city unleash precise volleys of explosive shells. The bursts form black clouds around the approaching bombers. Each explosion sends fragments of shrapnel tearing through the air. Within seconds, Ye Olde Pub takes multiple hits. A shell detonates beneath the nose, tearing open the metal skin and destroying critical instruments. Another burst slices through oxygen lines, forcing the crew to operate at dangerous limits. The hydraulic system begins to fail. The bomber struggles to maintain its place in formation. Falling behind in combat is perilous. Luftwaffe pilots scan the sky for isolated aircraft. A lone bomber presents an easier target than a tight formation. As Ye Olde Pub slips away from its squadron, German fighters quickly converge. The B-17's gunners attempt to fight back, but the damage is severe. The tail is nearly destroyed. The right wing leaks fuel in a steady stream. Cannon rounds cut through the fuselage, wounding several men. The bomber loses altitude, drifting lower and farther from the protection of the formation above. Inside the aircraft, chaos turns into determination. Despite the cold, the altitude, and the blood loss, the crew members continue working to stabilize the bomber. Electrical failures disrupt communication. Frost forms over instruments. The temperature inside the aircraft plummets as wind rushes through the holes punched into the fuselage, yet the bomber stays airborne. Brown grips the controls, focused on reaching the coastline. For the crew, survival depends on keeping the aircraft moving west, even if only at a fraction of normal speed. While the American bomber limps across Germany, a Luftwaffe fighter sits ready at an airfield near Oldenburg. The pilot assigned to respond is Franz Stigler, A veteran with significant combat experience, Stigler has flown missions in North Africa and Europe, earning victories through discipline and skill. He is familiar with the brutality of air combat. Luftwaffe pilots often fight outnumbered and under immense pressure, especially by late 1943. Stigler gets airborne and climbs toward higher altitude. He immediately notices smoke from a damaged aircraft. As he approaches, the object becomes clear. A single B-17 moving slowly toward the sea. The bomber is in terrible condition, far worse than most of the stragglers he has seen. Stigler angles his fighter from behind, expecting return fire from the tail guns. Instead, he sees no muzzle movement and no sign of defense. The crew in the rear is clearly injured. The tail has absorbed an unimaginable amount of damage. One section is almost detached. The guns hang motionless. Stigler moves closer, examining more details. The fuselage is ripped open. The nose compartment is shattered. The engines run unevenly, their propellers rotating at mismatched speeds. He sees the faces of American airmen looking back at him, exhausted, pale, and wounded. They prepare themselves for the end, anticipating the final burst of gunfire. But Stigler hesitates. The scene reminds him of something he learned early in the war. One of his commanding officers emphasized that honor mattered even under combat conditions. Shooting defenseless pilots was not a mark of victory. It was a violation of the unwritten rules of air combat. To Stigler, the crippled B-17 resembles a plane full of men who can no longer fight back. Destroying them would feel like firing on those who had no chance to resist. He makes a decision that contradicts typical wartime behavior. Instead of pulling the trigger, he approaches the bomber's wingtip and matches its speed. He positions himself close enough for the crew to see that he is not preparing another attack. Brown and his men, confused and uncertain, refrain from firing their last functioning gun positions. The moment becomes an unusual pause in a war where seconds normally decide life or death. Stigler realizes that if the bomber continues on its current path, German anti-aircraft guns will shoot it down long before it reaches the coast. He adjusts his flight path to shield the bomber from ground guns, flying in formation so that the flak crews assume he is escorting a captured or surrendered aircraft. The deception works. Flak positions hold their fire as the two aircraft, enemy and enemy, move together across the German landscape. The scene is unprecedented. A German fighter escorting an American bomber to safety, passing over farmland, small towns, frozen fields, and deployment zones that have seen years of conflict. Soldiers on the ground look up but do not engage. The B-17 continues struggling forward, its engines pushed beyond safe limits. Stigler maintains his position until the coastline appears in the distance. Once they reach the edge of German-controlled airspace, the two aircraft begin to diverge. The B-17 heads toward the North Sea, while Stigler prepares to turn back. He knows he has pushed the limits of what is acceptable inside the Luftwaffe. Damaging a bomber is one thing. Allowing one to escape untouched is something else entirely. The risk of punishment, even execution, is real. To protect himself, he tells no one on his base what occurred. The encounter becomes a private memory, kept silent as the war continues its relentless pace. On the Allied side, Ye Olde Pub continues limping toward England. The bomber barely holds together. Air traffic controllers are surprised the aircraft appears at all. Brown manages a landing that brings the mission to an end. Ground crews inspect the bomber and express disbelief at its condition. Holes cover the fuselage, systems are destroyed. The fact that it stayed in the air, let alone crossed Germany, is shocking. Brown files his report, including the fighter escort. The account seems so improbable that it receives little attention at the time. As the war drags on, both men continue with their duties. Stigler flies more missions, though Germany's situation becomes increasingly desperate. After the war, he eventually moves to Canada, seeking a new life far from the destruction he witnessed. Brown returns to America, completing his service and transitioning back into civilian life. Decades pass before Brown seriously begins searching for the mysterious German pilot who spared them. This effort leads to letters, inquiries, and eventually a connection. Stigler responds to one of the messages, describing the details with striking accuracy. Their accounts match. The two men arrange to meet in person. When they finally stand face to face, they recognize each other even after nearly 50 years. A strange wartime encounter transforms into friendship. Their families become close, and the two veterans grow emotionally connected through shared respect and gratitude. Historians later analyze the event as one of the most unusual acts of mercy in the European Air War. It is not a formal ceasefire or a symbolic moment agreed upon by commanders. It is a split-second decision by one man who chose to preserve life when the expected response was destruction. That decision allowed another crew to return home and live full lives. The encounter becomes a reference point in discussions about ethics in warfare, reminding future generations that not all moments on the battlefield conform to the brutality surrounding them. Stigler and Brown continue to meet regularly until their deaths in 2008, passing away only months apart. Their story remains a testament to the idea that even in the most hostile environments, individuals can act according to conscience. In a war defined by industrial-scale violence, one German pilot and one American pilot demonstrated that compassion could still exist in the sky over Europe. Today, their encounter is preserved in documentaries, museums, and historical accounts, not as a myth or a legend, but as a verified moment of humanity during one of the deadliest conflicts in history. What occurred over Germany that day remains a reminder that the actions of individuals can transcend the boundaries of war, leaving behind a legacy that outlasts the conflict itself.